Hi, I'm Lara from 5 out of 4 Patterns and welcome to Sewing School. Today we're talking about a full bicep adjustment on a raglan sleeve. I don't know about you, not everyone has this issue, but I feel like I've had it my whole life, where my body is one size and my biceps are another. So today we're going to jump right in to learning how to adjust the bicep on a raglan sleeve. All right, here we are, all ready to get started on our bicep adjustment. I've got a straight edge, I've got a tape measure, I've got paper, I've got various writing utensils, I've got a hem gauge, I've also got scissors and tape, which we will all need. The first thing we're going to do, well, in addition to printing out our pattern piece and assembling it, the first thing we're going to do is mark our seam allowance. For the Nancy Raglan that I'm using today, and most other 5 out of 4 patterns, the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to start by marking that from a couple inches down here from these corners all the way up around the top. Okay, our seam allowance is all marked and we are ready to go to our next step. So the first thing we do, number 1, is mark the seam allowance. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to draw a line from corner to corner on the inside of the seam allowance here. So we're going to grab our straight edge and we are going to draw that line. All right, so we've drawn line number 2. Okay, now I'm going to get some tape and I'm going to tape these pages down a little bit more securely. All right, the next step, line number 3, is to measure this line that we just drew, line number 2, and mark the center of that line. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so we mark the center. Now we're going to draw a straight line up the center of the pattern piece. You can use the line that you just drew as kind of an anchor point. It gives you the ability to have, if you use one of these rulers, to get a straight level line. Okay, so we're going to draw a line from the bottom to the top. All right. Okay, so that is line number 3. All right, so the first thing we did, quick recap before we move on, is we marked our seam allowance, number 1. Number 2, we drew a line across here from corner to corner on the inside of the seam allowance, and then we drew a line down the center of the pattern piece. Now, the next thing we are going to do has to do with the shoulder area. Remembering that with a raglan sleeve, you don't have a typical sleeve cap on your front and back bodice, as they come together. Your sleeves actually cover your shoulders. So we have to determine where the shoulder ends and the sleeve or arm begins. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your tape measure and you're going to put on your muslin that you made before you started this adjustment. Otherwise, how would you know you needed it? So now that you've got your muslin on, which I actually have my first Nancy Raglan that I ever made on, so this is my muslin, and it does indeed need a bicep adjustment. And I'm going to measure from the seam allowance on my shoulder, from the seam allowance to the end of my shoulder. This gives us All right, we're looking at approximately 4 inches from the seam allowance on my shirt, on my raglan, to the end of my shoulder-ish, give or take. Perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough. So we are going to measure down the center from the seam allowance, marking. We're going to measure down 4 inches, or whatever your measurement is, because, you know, everybody's not the same and every size isn't the same. So we've got that. The next thing I want to do is I want to draw a line all the way across. All right, again, using your the first line that you drew, line number 2, I guess is what it's called, as to help you get a straight line there. There we go. I'll get there eventually. Okay, now we're just going to draw a line across. Okay, that is line number 4. All right, now here comes the fun part. We're going to start from where the seam allowance and this line that we just drew meet, and we're going to draw a V down to this center point. So a diagonal here, diagonal here. That's what we're going to do. So let me grab another marker here, and we're just going to meet up the center. There's one side. And there is the other side. All right, that is line number 5. All right, it's looking good. I love the way it looks. It's my favorite part of adjusting patterns, just looking at all the things that are going on. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start making cuts. So I'm going to start with the number 3 line, okay, the center line, and I'm going to cut it from the bottom up to the this number 2 line, okay? So you're going to cut number 3 and stop at the number 2 line, at the center there of the number 2 line. Okay, so I've stopped. Now I'm going to cut all the way here on the number 2, from the number 3 line across the number 2 line, not going all the way through the pattern piece. I'm going to stop about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, so that we have this ability to pivot. It's kind of, you know, like a hinge. And we're going to do that to the other side as well, from the number 3 line across the number 2 line, but not going all the way through the pattern piece. And if you do, just stick a little piece of tape on there, you'll be fine. All right, so here's what we've got. Okay, we can move these around freely, but we've got more to cut. Now we're going to start at the center number 3 line again, and we're going to cut the diagonal lines on either side of the number 3 line. And we're going to do just like we did before. Let me grab a little piece of tape here so my pattern piece doesn't feel funny. Okay, and we're going to go up to the edge, but not going through the edge of the pattern. So about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I need another piece of tape. Okay. Tape is your friend. Okay, so here's our regular unadjusted pattern piece, and we can now make all sorts of adjustments. Now, the place where the biggest adjustment will be right in here, okay, which is the widest part of the bicep. Now, what we don't want is we don't want to move it apart and leave it like this, because what you notice down here at the bottom of the sleeve at your hem is it's really wide, and we don't really need to make that adjustment there. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab a scrap piece of paper, and we're going to put it under our pattern, okay, like so. All right, then we'll grab our tape, and we're going to take the corner of a tiny piece of tape, and I mean tiny, because we don't come up very far, maybe 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and tape that down to this extra piece of paper. What that does is that keeps the sleeve, or the hem of the sleeve, in place. So when you make adjustments to your pattern piece, this is staying the same, okay? It's moving a little bit, but it's not getting wider, is my point. Okay, so let's grab a couple more pieces, at least one more piece of scrap paper, maybe, okay? And we're going to put that under our pattern piece, which is now just kind of a mess. Okay, here we are, looking good. All right, I feel much better now. Okay, so we have no adjustments being made at the moment, which is great. But what I've done is I've measured from seam allowance to seam allowance to find out what the full width of that bicep is. I've also measured my own bicep, and then I've looked at what the goal is for the look of the pattern and what I'm hoping for. And I'm just going to have to play with it. I'm going to have to make my muslin and decide, I need it to be a lot looser or not very much looser at all, and go from there. So for me personally, because I've done this adjustment, I don't know, 100 times now, I know I need about 3/4 of an inch to an inch, somewhere between there, and I'm good to go. So I've got my tape handy, and I'm going to pull apart this piece down here, okay? I'm not going to worry about all the triangles, okay? In fact, let me fold those so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to pull these apart here, about 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and then I'm going to measure it just to make sure that I'm somewhat close, and I'm about 3/4 of an inch right there, and then I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't go anywhere, and I'll undo these little folds that I did. That was just to move it around so you can see. So your triangles are now going to come to the top of your pattern piece. Okay, so the triangle pieces, they're going to lay where they want to lay. You don't have to, do anything weird to manipulate them. They're just there to accommodate the space that you made. So now that we have done that, we can begin taping everything down. The triangle pieces should lay flat pretty easily. They shouldn't give you any trouble at all. All right, so you can see we've got some extra paper hanging out. We will trim all of that off momentarily. Just want to get us a solid piece that isn't going to fall apart the moment we move it. So yes, I am using a lot of tape. Whoopsies. Okay, let's also tape down here. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the excess off here. You will be tempted, I promise you, the first time you do it, you will be tempted to just cut it right at the edge of this pattern piece. But please do not do that. If you cannot tell, hopefully you can, that the ends are here and it kind of comes up into a hump, kind of humps up towards the center and back down. Because you pulled this out, it brought these ends kind of down. You want to straighten that out. Please don't just cut across. Use your straight edge and a writing utensil and line up from edge to edge. Oops. Being careful. Take your time. There's no need to be in a hurry, and draw across there. Now, you can see the moment I move the straight edge, the difference between the end of the pattern piece and the actual level straight edge. So you really do need to make that level. You do need to do that. Don't skip that part. So now we're going to cut across the mark that I just made. Trim it up a little bit more. There we go. All right, so we've got a level line there. Let's turn it here. We need to get rid of this excess paper. So we'll just trim that. We'll trim that off. All right, full bicep adjustment. I love full bicep adjustments. They've made a huge difference with the way my clothes feel on me and the way they look. I'm so much more confident when clothes fit properly. I hope you will join us next time for sewing school. Bye.